You're listening to the Monocle Daily, first broadcast on the 23rd of May, 2025 on Monocle Radio.
India and Pakistan take their fight into the diplomatic theatre, Brazil mourns the passing of its greatest photographer, and Monocle builds a little Portugal in Switzerland. I'm Andrew Muller. The Monocle Daily starts now. Hello and welcome to the Monocle Daily, coming to you from our studios here at Midori House in London. I'm Andrew Muller. My guests Kirsten Seymour James, Carlotta Rebello, Juliet Linley, Steph Chungu, Fernando Augusto Pacheco and Tom Webb. We'll discuss the day's big stories and or other stuff, and we'll have our weekly wrap-up of what we've learned in the last 7 days. Stay tuned, all that and more coming up right here on the Monocle Daily. This is the Monocle Daily. I'm Andrew Muller. First of all, the global relief which attended the decision of India and Pakistan to call their recent hostilities a draw and stand down should not cause anyone to imagine that the issue which sparked it, Kashmir, has gone anywhere. As smoke clears and dust settles, etc., India and Pakistan have both launched diplomatic offensives across Asia, Europe, Africa and the Americas, attempting to wrangle support and create legitimacy in advance of potential future conflict. India's pitch is essentially that Pakistan is both nest and sponsor of Islamist jihadis bent on global havoc, while Pakistan is arguing that India is an authoritarian bully run by a sort of subcontinental Vladimir Putin. Well, I'm joined now in the studio by the journalist Kirsten Seymour James from St Antony's College, Oxford, formerly based in Islamabad. These pictures that they're making to the international community, and this is one of the infuriating things about this conflict, neither of them are entirely wrong, are they?
I would say in what you're saying, neither of them are wrong isn't correct thing to say, because I would say there are some pretty flagrant mistakes made by the Indian side, particularly under Modi, ignoring the UN resolution, but the most particular one, the resolution in 58, or 51 rather, was the first one. So when there was partition between India and Pakistan, basically it was Muslims got the Pakistan side and Hindus got the Indian side. And what happened in Kashmir area, which is a very beautiful, desirable place, part of the region, what happened there is that the Maharajas basically had struck a deal before that partition, and they tried to keep that land. They felt that they had bought that land. And therein, from the very beginning, started the first war. And then you had a referendum, and then it's gone on ever since. It's not actually ever been upheld. But the recent thing that's happened, there have been, most Pakistanis would say, I was there in 2019, that most of the wars break out right before Modi elections. And the same has happened this time with some score settling, because they were slightly embarrassed by the Pakistan army shooting down their jets the last time, and then they backed away and did nothing. So lots of arm flexing from Modi. But what's unique this time is they broke the water treaty, which is...
This is the one governing water from the Indus.
This is right. So the Indus water, it is completely a paramount issue for Pakistan this time, why they fought so hard and so vociferously as well, threatening nuclear attack, which they've never done in the past with all the years, 20-something years, 30-something years of conflict. The Kashmiri conflict has gone on that long. I was on the Kashmir desk in 2009, 2010 in Islamabad, so I've been all over the region many times, and now under Modi, he's tried to change the demography by getting Hindus to move into the area. It's always been predominantly, obviously, Muslim. And so this time, cutting off the water, it was a cheap trick, because they know that Pakistan always would use sort of the Pakistani Taliban, Tariqi Taliban, which isn't exactly the Afghan Taliban. And they and the Haqqani network, which are also on this side of the border, they started, that's where the madrasa is, the Dar el-Uloom madrasa. That started, bin Laden did all his training from there. That's the very notorious place. So the Haqqanis, the one reason that Pakistan has either been in fighting with them or allied with them is whether or not there's conflict in Kashmir. If there's conflict in Kashmir, everything is dropped in the tribal areas, and they will fight for the Pakistanis, their brothers ultimately, for Kashmir. Because the one thing that unifies Pakistan with all the identity crisis of the regions internally is the anti-India sentiment. Mm-hmm. So because since the war in 21 in Afghanistan dropped down and NATO troops left, in Pakistan and Afghanistan have actually been at war. So there's been a quiet war on the ground. And India knows that they no longer have the tough fighters, the Pathan fighters, so to protect them on the Kashmiri border, because their troops are all on the western border. So the timing was pretty specific and hitting their vulnerability. They did the water treaty, which is the first time they've ever broken that water treaty, which was from 1958. So it was a very significant move this time.
I mean, that is different, the abrogation of the Indus Water Treaty. But as you correctly point out, there is a great deal of history where Kashmir is concerned. Do you get the feeling, though, that this recent burst of fighting did actually fundamentally change anything? Has the dynamic tilted in any particular direction?
The main thing I can see is the international recognition of it, because there have been massively bloody wars, lots of skirmishes in the past. Like I said, I was there in 2019 when India had fighter jets come over the border, and there was fighting at that time as well. And of course, that was right before an election, too, the last election. So Modi has been pretty notorious for breaking some of the rules. And I think under Indira, it was a little bit more gentle period of time. But I think this time having, I mean, even to my own, I was quite shocked when Trump was involved. He was very quiet about Afghanistan in the beginning.
At least he claimed to be involved.
Well, he comes in, yes, there's that. But him coming in, I would probably say had very much to, everybody's looking at Afghanistan. It's the old great game, and nobody's forgetting that the Russians aren't forgetting that they lost the Soviet Union pretty much because of the fall of not beating the Taliban in Afghanistan. And then, of course, the Americans lost in Afghanistan as well. So it is sort of the gaping wound. And now we still have sort of like a new, bilateral relations between Russia and America having to do with Ukraine. But so there is all kinds of multilateral relations going on as far as vying for influence in that region. Pakistan was being squeezed from all sides. India's developing roads, investing there's lots of investment going into Afghanistan. That's making them incredibly nervous. They're fighting Afghanistan themselves on the ground, on the tribal area, on the Durand line. So in the meantime, China comes in. And to, I think, Trump's surprise, China backs Pakistan very, very openly and strongly.
That's quite a long relationship, though, between China and Pakistan.
It is long as in, I would say...
Or at least it's been friendlier than the relationship they have with India.
I think Pakistan and Chinese relations started in about 2012, really, where they, the infrastructure being built by the Chinese, coming over the borders, the water. They have their own water treaties and things, and pipelines being built. And that's going through Central Asia. Of course, that strikes a nerve with Putin, because that's Tajikistan and Western China, the Uyghur Muslims are. So there's an interest for Pakistan in Western China as well. So they do have a connection through that aspect. So yes, and obviously they share the water from Himalayan China. That very water goes through India and then goes into northern Pakistan. It goes all the way down to the Arabian Sea. So yeah, and China's also developing, let's not forget, lots in Afghanistan, and discouraging Afghanistan from developing way too much with India. So there's some complexity going on. And the Haqqanis were flown to Beijing in November by China for a meeting there. So it's very clear that China and Afghanistan are developing relations. What's really interesting and curious is that Russia was so quiet through this entire situation. So surprising. I didn't expect to hear from the American president, but I think China showing up it wasn't the fear, the threat of the nuclear war, as much as it was China, having such a strong voice. Pakistan's always been America's baby by proxy wars in Afghanistan and it being a client state, which is exactly why they're having the war on the ground with the tribal regions right now. So it's extremely multipolar and, very complex. Keep up if you can.
Kirsten Seymour James, thank you very much for joining us. You're listening to The Daily. You're listening to The Daily on Monocle Radio. Within the last couple of hours, the death has been confirmed of Sebastião Salgado, the preeminent Brazilian photographer of his generation. He was 81. Monocle's senior correspondent, Fernando Augusto Pacheco, joins us now. Fernando, we were talking about this earlier. There are not many places and not many circumstances in which the death of a photographer, however great, fills up front pages of a big country. But that is what is happening right now where you come from.
Absolutely, and the reaction across the political spectrum. Sebastião Salgado, I can truly say he was a Brazilian legend. He was living in Paris, and the reason why he lived in Paris, he had to escape Brazil during the military dictatorship. Mm-hmm. So he was exiled there, so now he's a Brazilian and French citizen. But his images, Andrew, I think the importance of him, we talk a lot about the conservation of the Amazon today. I think in part because of Salgado's pictures. So a lot of the first encounter that people had perhaps with images of Amazonian tribes or of the forest, of the illegal deforestation, they probably come from Sebastião Salgado's work. So he's, I have to say, he's a legend. He's not just in Brazil. As the editor of Folha de São Paulo said, is a loss to the world.
I mean, it is hard to imagine that any of our listeners will not have seen at least one of his images. They may or may not have realised that they were looking at a Salgado picture. But you're quite right in that our visual understanding of the Amazon comes largely through his lens. What sense do we get, though, of what drove him to do that? Because taking pictures of the Amazon, trekking all the way into it, getting to know its people, that's not a small undertaking. It would have been just a lot easier to sit on the beach in Rio.
No, really. He's always been an activist. And Andrew, one of the interesting aspects of his biography that I was kind of surprised, I have to say. He grew up, as you said in the beginning of the show, in a small town called Aimorés. Only 25,000 people lived there in a family of farmers. So he didn't come from privilege necessarily. He was self-taught and he was very much involved in politics from an early age. And that's why, we're discussing here that he had to escape. So it's quite an interesting look. He wasn't a privileged person at all. He was just very talented. His work has been published in Life magazine, in Time magazine. So he really cared about his subjects. A lot of people even say that the problem of Sebastião Salgado's pictures that he kind of beautified the suffering. But he completely disagreed with that. He said, well, those are my pictures and those are my connections and it's not my fault. Basically, he used a swear word against his critics. I'm trying to kind of say this in a more polite way, and I kind of agree. That's his style of photography, and I don't think he did that at all. Quite the opposite. He was, he was very much committed to the Amazon, still today. I think he wanted to be at COP30, which will be in Brazil later this year. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen. But
do you think, just finally, there was, a political imperative animating his photography, that he wasn't just trying to take nice pictures, there was a point he was trying to make?
Absolutely. And some of his most iconic pictures, and I remember one from Serra Pelada, which is an area of Brazil where there's a lot of kind of mining. And a lot of Brazilian workers moved there. And of course, there was some
This
problem.
is the picture that people will absolutely have seen, even if they didn't realize it was Salgado.
That's the iconic one. And even in Brazil, he took the pictures and people start talking about it and maybe acting on it as well. And I think that's the importance and the power of photojournalism here.
Fernando Augusto Pacheco, thank you for joining us. This is the Daily on Monocle Radio. If you are or are planning to be in Zurich tomorrow, i.e. Saturday, May 24th, do drop by Monocle's headquarters at Duferstrasse 90 for a taste of Portugal. In partnership with Visit Portugal, the annual Badi Market showcases Portuguese food, drink and retail, and at least one actual Portuguese person, specifically Monocle's senior foreign correspondent Carlotta Rebello, who joins me now along with the less Portuguese broadcaster Juliet Linley. Hello to you both. Carlotta, first of all, tell us a bit about what the mood has been like at the Badi Market today, which, of course, began this afternoon.
Hola, Andrew. Yes, and I'm happy to say it's not just me here representing Portugal in the flesh. It's been fantastic. The studio overlooks directly the Pastel de Nata stand, which has not been great for my diet, just to be looking over it all afternoon. But it's been a fantastic day. It was quite sunny, so as soon as the afternoon began, people started arriving. We have so many vendors, both here by the radio studio, but also near the cafe and inside Trunk Clothiers as well, as part of our partnership with the brand La Paz. And it's been just fantastic. Juliet, you've been doing the rounds here as well, haven't you? Has any brands stood out for you so far?
Well, I did start off with Senor Gonçalves that you mentioned with all of his pastéis. But I then moved on rapidly, and I was so happy to meet Paula Giesler, who is actually Swiss, but she has a beautiful stand where she has the typical azulejos, the Portuguese tiles, and she will personalize a coffee table or even outdoor furniture with these tiles. And she's an architect who actually did her residency with a company that's 178 years old in Portugal that makes these tiles. So I thought that was very interesting. It sort of combined Zurich and Portugal. And then right opposite her, there's a lovely lady whose jewelry has very Portuguese themes. So themes of the sea, obviously. Like you've got even a bracelet like that's sort of meant to look like the chain of an anchor, and some earrings that look like mussels. I mean, fancy that.
And Carlotta, at least part of the purpose of this event is to encourage people to visit Portugal, and to that extent, Visit Portugal are involved. Can you tell us a bit about that tie-up?
Yes, absolutely. So Visit Portugal, the official tourism board of the country, has partnered with us beginning 2 weeks ago when we did this version of the market right where you are, Andrew, at Midori House in London. And now we're repeating the success here in Zurich. And the idea is not only to bring this showcase of brands that people might not know, but also, we have some films playing and we have an event as well. So later this evening, there'll be a panel discussion here with the ambassador, Júlio Vilela, that's Portugal's ambassador to Switzerland, who's going to talk about, brand Portugal and the importance of made in Portugal. And then we have a panel discussion focused on creativity, design and craftsmanship. And really this is about that idea that, Portugal's textile crafts industry is kind of the strength of its soft power. We don't need to shout about it. It's savored. And, through textiles or design or hospitality, that's actually helping put Portugal on the map. So it's a chance not only to get to know the brands here and maybe buy some stuff yourself. You might want one of these azulejo tables for your house, Andrew, and if so, we can send you some pictures. But it's also about, hearing from inspiring designers and entrepreneurs who are helping to put Portugal on the map too.
And Juliet, to bring you back in as our non-Portuguese control here, is the experience of the Badi Market suffusing you with a desire to go and visit the country?
It really is suffusing me with a desire to go. I have been on numerous occasions, but Portugal is very close to my heart. And there is an item here on sale that I kind of think that you would enjoy buying too. It's a straw little handbag, but it's got a leather handle to it, which I could almost see doubling as a briefcase with all your documents in it. So Andrew, maybe you might want to pop over either here or to Portugal to do a spot of shopping with me.
I have never seen myself as a straw handbag kind of guy.
Briefcase.
Or even straw briefcase kind of guy. Carlotta, to go back to the merchandise on offer, for people who may not see themselves as straw briefcase kind of people, what else has really caught your eye?
Well, there's one thing that's a success with everyone, and that has to be good quality olive oil. And we have a fantastic olive oil brand here represented, which usually when we have olive oil vendors at these events, including the market with Visit Portugal over there in London, it was the first thing that sold out. So get your orders in early, and I encourage everyone to come in early tomorrow morning if they want to get their hands on olive oil. But also, of course, there's a lot of fashion as well from Isto and from La Paz. That's mainly menswear. And then we have some fantastic rugs as well by Gruel. Some attentive listeners might remember that brand from Monocle magazine and from the Monocle Handbook of Portugal. This is an amazing hand-woven rugs by this artist based in the north of the country near Porto, and they're just beautiful designs. Maybe that can go in your house as well, Andrew.
And Juliet, just finally, remind our listeners, if you will, where they can find all this and what time tomorrow.
Please make your way to Dufourstrasse number 90 as of 9 a.m. tomorrow. But you can even come earlier. I mean, the cafe is open from earlier. They've got beautiful also Temada jewelry, which I was thinking you might also like. Very bright colored, reds and blacks, very large. And I think they're made from recycled wood.
Juliet Linley and Carlotta Rebello, thank you for your efforts to bankrupt me. You are listening to The Daily on Monocle Radio. This is The Daily with me, Andrew Muller. Earlier this week, London hosted the Sauna Summit, which, as the name very strongly portends, was a summit concerned primarily with saunas. Among the attendees was Monocle's Deputy Head of Radio, Tom Webb, who joins me now. Tom, what goes on at a sauna summit?
This was a very special one. A sauna summit.
As opposed to all those sort of quotidian, mediocre, unremarkable sauna summits.
Yep, no, this one involved saunas like all the others, but it's special because Finnish expats in Britain came together with Brits who loved saunas about 10 years ago to celebrate the joy of saunas, specifically Finnish saunas. And this was a time where people just weren't using them or understood what they were like. They're usually sort of radiators in a damp wooden box. But they brought over the Finnish sauna, and since the pandemic, it's completely exploded, which has caused them to come together and to bring everyone around the world to celebrate the joy of this type of sauna.
So at the actual sauna summit, does much of the discussion go on inside saunas?
I made a joke about this during the sauna itself because it happened in Hilton Conference Centre in Canary Wharf, and the conference centre itself was about 35 degrees. So it became a sauna. I did ask for the air conditioning to go on. However, the sauna itself is the Arc sauna. It's brand new, and it's for 40 people. It's the largest in the country. It's a 10-minute walk away from the Canary Wharf Conference Centre, and it didn't open till 6:30 p.m, by which I'd had enough of all the hot air and had left. But we talk about the joy of saunas in a huge roster of events and speakers, and that's what people were there to, apart from the triangular mustard sandwiches, there to attend.
I know this is a big thing for Finland because I have, as regular and by now long-serving listeners to the Foreign Desk may recall, I did once interview Finland's ambassador to the United Kingdom in the sauna at the Finnish ambassador's residence. He was there, I believe.
He was, and if you listen to Tuesday's Daily, you would have heard my interview with him, and he was very, very funny. Last year they invited the Estonian ambassador to open proceedings. This year the Finnish ambassador, which he thanked the Estonian for standing in for him while he was on holiday. But I spoke to many other very, very interesting people, including the sauna master himself, 2024, who's Alex Lembeke, and he has you're looking at me because I pronounced the surname incorrectly.
No, I'm not. I'm quizzically squinting at the invocation of the sauna master. Is this a title distributed annually? Does it come with like a special hat?
He didn't even realise it existed. They just knocked on his door and said, "Congratulations, you have won it."
It's a bit like telling someone they're the next Dalai Lama.
It is exactly that.
Okay.
But he'd won it because he has a very special job. He looks after the Rajay Porti sauna in Tampere, and that is the oldest public sauna in the world. And he's special to me because he shares my view on what a good sauna should be. And I asked him exactly for his opinion, and this was it.
It is very democratic, without any rules. Depending on the sauna, you take off clothes and you just sit together, and either you talk with each other or you don't, and everyone can do it as he likes it to do it. There's no performance elements in the sauna, because sauna in itself, being in the sauna, the act of being in the sauna, is enough for Finnish people. That's what it's all about. You don't have to kind of like become the so-called morning warrior, where you go to sauna to boost your dopamine levels, and then you go to cold plunge and all these things, because self-optimization can be exhausting. And in Finland, it's just, just going to sauna, and you go either on your own or you go to meet your friends. You go to talk or you go to not talk. So, there's all kinds of things, and everyone just does it as he wants to do it.
He's right, Tom. Self-optimization can be exhausting.
And highly annoying. He also said, it's not in that clip, is that thankfully saunas are the enemy of the mobile phone because of the moisture and the heat. And social media, in fact all media, including television screens, should be far, far away from that environment.
Just finally then, Tom, has this inspired you to have such a device installed in your own home?
I have thought about it. I enjoy the public sauna because, like a Finnish person, I enjoy the community and the conversation. I don't enjoy other people's conversation. That is the problem with what he's saying.
Finns are famous, Tom, for not enjoying community or conversation at all. That's why they lock themselves in small, dark rooms full of steam.
It is true, but according to Lonely Planet, a Finnish person may seem cold on the surface, but if you get them to become your friend, they become your friend, and your most loyal friend for life, as Marcus Hippie can prove to me personally.
Tom Webb, thank you for joining us. You are listening to The Daily. This is The Daily on Monocle Radio. The revival of homegrown British rap in the 2010s saw a surge in popularity for UK rappers, including the second British rapper to headline Glastonbury, Stormzy. Those origins and the resurgence have been bound into a new book, Where We Come From, Rap, Home and Hope in Modern Britain. It's written by Anafiok Ekpodum, and he explores how a history of migration and an enduring spirit of resistance have shaped the current realities of these linked communities and the music they produce. We will hit play on the interview shortly, but first of all, joining me in the studio is Monocle's Steph Chungu, who spoke to Anafiok about the book. Introduce him, first of all, if you will.
Sure. So Anafiok Onif is a cultural writer and critic based in the UK. He has written for several popular culture publications, and Where We Come From is his first book, basically just an expansion on the world of modern rap, like how it started, how it bounced back, and how it's still keeping up with popularity today in the UK's music scene and the industry.
How did he go about compiling this story, though? Because there is a long history by now of British rap and British hip-hop. So what did he focus on?
He focused on many things. I will say that the book itself is not a typical non-fiction history book about a popular music genre. It is written so well in a narrative format that it feels like you're coming in and reading a story and to be plain about it. It features a lot of history and the upbringings of certain artists. Stormzy, as you mentioned, Dave from Streatham, Kano from East London, and some rappers that sadly passed away a couple of years ago. But also he incorporates the social history and the mobility during the rise and the resurgence of rap history. So, of course, including Brexit, the Windrush generation, and how it affected the music industry and the rap community in Britain.
Is this, just before we hit play on it, one of those non-fiction books, especially one of those narrative non-fiction books that you think, and because I always think this is the highest compliment you can pay a non-fiction book, that even people who aren't particularly interested in the subject will still get something out of it because of the way it tackles the surrounding story and the surrounding culture and I guess tells the story of its times?
One thing I will say about the book is, I read the hardback edition last year, and I fell in love with it because of how honest and how loving he was to the rap music scene, but also he was very honest in how there was some like fallbacks and setbacks. I don't think it's a typical book that you can just be like, oh, you don't have to read it. It's a book that it does explore the world of rap. It's not introductory based. It's something that is familiar towards the reader if you're well versed in the rap industry. But for those who are not, it feels like you're entering in a world where it's so surreal and explosive and a face of reality that you've never read before, which I really have recommended to everyone and their pets, to be honest. So when I did speak to Ali Fiok recently, I did ask him how long was the preparation and researching and composing the book, because he's so well centered in the rap scene in London. And he said it took him about 5 years to write, and this is what else he said.
The book, it took about 5 years of research. So I was travelling to all of these places over a sustained period of time, so I could really understand the lives of the people in the book and to be able to write it in a way that felt quite intimate and quite personal. So it took about 5 years between research and me turning in my first draft.
It is very intimate. The format of the book is written in such a unique way that I've never read before. It's almost as if you're telling a story of the rap scene in the UK. What was the intention behind that writing style?
I'm a big narrative non-fiction fan, creative non-fiction fan, and that essentially looks to bring you to not tell like I guess just a factual listing of events, but more to bring you into the lives and the moments of the people who I was actually speaking about. And so I wanted to bring that style of writing, which combines like a lot of fictional techniques, but is of course rooted in non-fiction and rooted in the truth. But to use that to talk about people's lives in Britain in like quite a lyrical, but also in a very vivid way. So that was the idea. Was I didn't want it to just tell you about the music, because we live in a day and age where people can listen to the music. I really wanted to show you the lives and the places and really illuminate them in a reader's mind.
You write about Britain's unique brand of rap emerging from the music boomerang across the Black Atlantic, Jamaica to the Bronx, Bronx to Britain, in the cities and so on. Is there something unique about the way this has happened in Britain and the culture it gave rise to?
Yeah, definitely. I think Britain has a very unique rap scene because Britain has a very unique black community in that sense, where it is these sustained waves of migration over the past 60, 70 years. So at the onset of the book, I talk about the arrival of the Windrush generation in Birmingham, in Coventry, and also in South London. But then look at how their children and grandchildren, like So Solid Crew and whatnot, went to create early sounds of MC culture, whether that in Coventry, you had like the Specials, across the UK, you had like garage and jungle, and all of these forms of MC culture are intimately tied to UK rap. And then after that you have a big arrival of West African people in like the 80s and 90s, and you see that with the likes of Skepta and Little Sims and Stormzy and Dave. And then also you have like a huge migration of East African people and people that came from Somalia. All of these different groups of people have kind of melded together to make this quite distinct and unique sounds, which is, I guess, a showcasing of all of these overlapping cultures, but also more so a showcasing of, I guess, like a new British identity that has emerged in like the last 10, 20 years in that sense.
I do want to look at UK rap music as a soft power to Britain. We saw the phenomena of UK rap, so grime, drill, and so on, over the past years rise in such a insane scale internationally. Do you see the trend falling in recent times?
I wouldn't say falling. I think because when you look at the demographic that predominantly makes the music, the black population in the UK is small. So I think history has taught us that these things just go in waves. As I was saying before, we had jungle was huge, then that gave way to garage, and then garage was huge, and that gave way to grime, and grime was huge. All of these genres still exist and are still thriving, even if they don't necessarily thrive in a mainstream arena. I don't think they're meant to be sustained in a mainstream arena for extended periods of time. I think more they arrive there and then they recede and something else will take its place. So I think that's what's happened with UK rap. It had, of course, like the peak moments when you think of like Stormzy at Glastonbury or Dave at the Brits and all of these huge moments. And I think now, the sound has kind of spread into different parts of the country and different parts of the world. So I think the impact is there, but it's maybe not as... You can't have those moments every month, if that makes sense.
No.
Yeah.
Recently, we have seen a lot of rap artists in the UK be a lot more outspoken about the politics and global conflicts. A clear example is Kneecap at Coachella recently. Are we seeing more rappers being open to standing up to the politics, to the conflicts? Or do you think it is a trend that will die out, or is it just something to stick on to their own music?
I think it's something that's always been there. I think rap has always been a vehicle for that kind of expression. When you think back to like Black Twang and in those artists in the 90s, or like other artists who are making other forms of MC culture. You think of like Smiley Culture and all of these different artists. They were talking about what was going on at the time period. They were talking about like Stephen Lawrence and all of these other cases that were huge, but I think maybe they obviously just didn't have the platform that the artists have today, so it maybe wouldn't reach outside of the community in that sense. So I think that's always been a linchpin of the music, because I guess it is such a direct way to get a message out. And so I can't see a world where that ceases to be the case.
Finally, Niamh, for those who have not read the book yet, and I implore everyone to do that, what do you hope to take away from the book?
I'm not precious about what people take away from it, but I hope, I think maybe something I've come to learn about it, I think, is the degree of empathy for people, because some of the stories are so intimate. Some of them are quite traumatic. They have joyous moments. There's bereavement, there's violence, there's euphoria, there's, of course, music. And I think having an understanding of what happens outside of the music, I think, is as important as listening to the music itself at times.
That was Anefiok Ekpodum speaking to Steph Chungu. The book Where We Come From, Rap, Home and Hope in Modern Britain is published by Faber, and it is out now. You're listening to The Daily. And finally, on today's show, it's our weekly assessment of what the last 7 days have taught us. We learned this week of a new school of diplomacy to go alongside such niche disciplines as panda diplomacy, ping-pong diplomacy and elephant diplomacy, all of which are things which have happened. We learned specifically of golf diplomacy. A weirdly satisfying sound effect that. Can I get some general muttered agreement?
I think so.
Let's have it again. Now we're all having fun. We learned that South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, preparing to visit his US counterpart Donald Trump, had determined to appeal to his host via the medium of golf, a game at which Trump has cheated for many years, winning along the way several prestigious and imaginary honours.
This week, Donald Trump proudly announced that he had won 2 of his own trophies at his very own golf course in a single weekend. Wow.
All the while nobly refusing to allow his focus on the game to be broken by such inane, trivial frivolities as, for example, the ceremonial return of American service personnel killed in a training accident overseas.
Our own president was not present to receive their remains in a ceremony known as the dignified transfer when they arrived at Dover Air Force Base in Delaware. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth filled in for America's commander-in-chief, who chose instead to travel to Miami for a Saudi-funded live golf tournament at his own course.
We learned that, as a consequence of all of the above, President Ramaphosa had enlisted the support of top South African golfists Ernie Els and Retief Goosen, and had bought Trump a big book about golf. Let's have a hefty tome landing on a table with a resonant whump. Sadly, however, it didn't work. Aww. Well, quite. We learned that President Trump had resolved to give his guest a piece of his mind, for we learned that President Trump is not, despite what may have been assumed from his rhetoric and actions, entirely indifferent to the tribulations of poor huddled masses yearning to breathe free, etc. But we learned that with a world of trouble to choose from, Trump found himself moved by, and for some scarcely imaginable reason, white South African farmers, and by golly, he had printouts of newspaper articles to prove the extent of their plight.
Death of people. Death. 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 Horrible death.
We learned, however, when we looked such things up, because we're good like that a President of the United States is arguably venturing onto thin ice when he takes a pop at anyone else's country over violent crime, on the grounds that you are statistically more likely to get shot in New Orleans, St. Louis or Detroit than in Johannesburg, so there's that. Also, in the final quarter of last year, while 6,953 people were murdered in South Africa, a horrendous toll, no doubt, one was a white South African farmer. So we learned again, for some scarcely imaginable reason, Trump had become strangely fixated on one particular demographic. We learned, however, that though President Ramaphosa was a model of restraint throughout Trump's harangue, which was at one point illustrated with a video of inflammatory monologues by an eccentric opposition politician whose party won a single-finger percentage of the vote at South Africa's most recent election, a chap can only bite his tongue so long.
I'm sorry, I don't have a plane to give you.
I wish you did. I take it. I would take it. If your country offered the United States Air Force a plane, I would take it.
Still, future visitors to Trump's White House, should there be any, have now learned that the entry-level bribe is one aeroplane. In literary news, meanwhile. We learned of an exciting slate of holiday reading to which to look forward via a summer supplement in the Chicago Sun-Times, bristling with capsule reviews of new titles by big hitters including Isabel Allende with Tidewater Dreams, apparently her first climate fiction novel, and Min Jin Lee with Nightshade, a riveting tale set in Seoul's underground economy, it says here. We learned swiftly thereafter, however, that clearing space on our bookshelves would be lamentably wasted endeavour, as we learned that neither title nor many of the others enthusiastically blurbed by the Chicago Sun-Times actually exist. Aww. We learned thereby, and earnestly hope others learn therefrom, something of the folly of outsourcing any aspect of journalism whatsoever to AI, which we learned was exactly what some idle hack cranking out copy for a syndication farm had done, without bothering to check whatever twaddle the machine cranked out. Still less, actually doing the goddamn assignment like a professional taking elementary pride in their labours. We further learned, and earnestly hope publishers do as well, that though experienced human sub-editors do tend to want paying, they're pretty good at preventing your title from beclowning itself in this fashion.
I think the same. An
encomium we reserve the right to retract next time they cut one of our extremely amusing jokes. Still, we learned that the hapless scrivener responsible for the fictional fiction can console himself that he was not the only American rumbled skipping the work this week, as we learned that US Secretary for Homeland Security Kristi Noem should arguably have spent less time shooting puppies and more time boning up on the basics.
So, Secretary Noem, what is habeas corpus?
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right to...
Let me stop you, ma'am. Habeas corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
Or maybe leaving everything to the machines isn't such a bad idea after all. For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller. That's all for this edition of the Monocle Daily. Thanks to our panellists today, Kirsten Seymour James, Carlotta Rebello, Juliet Lindley, Steph Chungu, Fernando Augusto Pacheco and Tom Webb. Today's show was produced by Tom Webb and researched by Francesca Jilks. Our sound engineer was Steph Chungu. I'm Andrew Muller here in London. The Daily is back at the same time on Monday. Thanks for listening and have an excellent weekend.